So, last week we started talking about parables, and just in case anybody is worried, I guess I gotta turn this on. Now we're worried. Now I'm worried. I hope you can edit this. Oh. Sorry. I had it off. Alright, so just a quick review of what we talked about last week to get us thinking that way again. Parable comes from the Greek word parabole, okay? Which means para, beside, and bol, to cast or throw. So we're talking about casting or throwing something beside something that is already there. And what we're casting and throwing is a story. Okay, so there's something happens or whatever, and somebody wants to clarify it, so they tell a story about it, which I think is a really great way. So, for our purposes from here on in, talking about parables, we're going to look at a parable as a short story Jesus used to help people understand a more difficult question or idea, often a religious principle or moral attitude, which is a lot of big words to saying Jesus believed in making things as simple as possible so that people could understand. Jesus often used parables to answer people's questions. Somebody would ask him a question and he would say, let me tell you a story. Which I really like, and I've known people like that who I would ask a question and they would say, well, let me tell you a little story about that. And I think it really helps us all. But the key to them, to parables, is they are meant to be simple and easily understood by those who believed or wanted to believe in Jesus and the kingdom of God. Remember what I said last week? There was that sort of a little ulterior motive with what Christ was doing, because he knew all the guys, the learned guys up the top, you know, with the PhDs and all of that kind of stuff, they were almost too smart to get what he was saying. And the other thing was they didn't really want to get it. They didn't really want to listen to him, and they didn't really want to hear him or to understand him. And so the parables were a way in which it almost became almost like a code for those who were Christ followers or wanted to be able to learn things that the PhD and whatever's above PhD guys were trying to do. They really were, if you think about it, and the way I like to think about it is, it's like Jesus reaching out to his children and saying to them, this is something I want you to know. I think it's important that you know this. And, as importantly, I care as your father that you know this. And I teach you using this method because I love you and I want to help you. Just by way, remember last week we did the survey of parables? Just so you know what we're doing over the next couple of weeks. We're starting today. Your number one choice was the parable of the talents. Your number two choice was the lost sheep, followed by a friend at night, 10 virgins, and the Pharisee and the publican. Those were the 5 parables out of the 10 that were most chosen. So as much as I would like to teach as many parables as possible, obviously we can't, so those are the ones that you wish me to try to explain to you, which could be really seriously funny. Oh, and I'm going to throw in, hopefully before I finish this, a modern parable that I read that I just love. And we're going to look at a modern parable as well. So I'm going to start today. I'm not going to read this parable to you right now.
For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country, who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods. And unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to every man according to his several ability. And straightway took his journey. Then he that had received the 5 talents went and traded with the same and made them other 5 talents. And likewise he that had received 2 talents, he also gained other 2. But he that had received 1 went and digged in the earth and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants cometh and reckoneth with them. And so he that had received 5 talents came and brought other 5 talents, saying, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 talents more. His Lord said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. He also that had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 other talents beside them. His Lord said unto him, Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. Then he which had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew thee that thou art an hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed. And I was afraid, and went and hid thy talent in the earth. Lo, there thou hast that is thine. His Lord answered, and said unto him, Thou wicked and slothful servant, thou knewest that I reap where I sowed not, and gathered where I had not strawed. Thou oughtest therefore to have put my money to the exchanges, and at my coming I should have received mine own with usury. Take therefore the talent from him, and give it to him which hath 10 talents, for unto every one that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance. But from him that hath not shall be taken away even that he hath. And cast ye the unprofitable servant into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Okay, so we're going to start right now, and we're going to talk a little bit about the parable of the talents. And what I want you to understand first, though, is when we're talking about talents, and I never really thought about it until I started researching a little bit about it, is that talents were money, okay? And I always thought that the master gave them a few coins, 5 talents, and it was no big deal. It would be like giving them 50 cents or something like that. In actual fact, a talent was a measure, and what it measured was 35 kilograms of gold. The approximate value of 35 kilograms of gold is $600,000. So when we say that this master gave one of his servants 5 talents, he gave him $3 million to take care of. Okay? Even the one who got the least was given $600,000. Okay? So I want you to keep that in mind. So they weren't just given a little bag of coins, like you might give your child to go to the candy store or something. It was pretty serious money that they were given. And I think that we need to understand that because Christ chose that because he wanted us to understand, or the people at the time who were hearing this parable, that it was something really valuable that was being talked about here. Okay? There was some real value to what was being given to these servants. It's also, oh, here it is here, sorry. Okay, I apologize, you guys. And just so you know, I'll back up here quickly. If you look up, this parable is also found in Luke, and it's actually called the parable of the minutes, which is a different measure of money, which is actually a little bit less. Anyway, so if you look at a talent, it was about 16 years worth of wages that were so the one guy who got 5 got 80 years worth of wages, all in one lump payment. What a buyout, eh? They didn't give me that when I left the TDSB, I can tell you. Okay, I'm going to go back for just a sec here. Sorry, this is a little bit confusing today. Okay, but I want you also to keep in mind there is another meaning for the word talent. Okay? A talent is a skill or a gift or ability that we have naturally to do something that other people may find difficult. Okay? It's an ability at times we call it something we were born with and able to do. Things like you may have a musical talent and the ability to sing. Okay? You may have great athletic talent like Dwight. You may have artistic talent. You may have talent to do school well. And you know what? Some people do school well. Other people who are equally as smart struggle. And there's a real skill to doing school well. And on and on. You could have the skill to be a leader, a missionary, or a peacemaker. And I want you to keep that alternate definition of talents in mind, because we're going to actually have a look at this parable and transpose that value and that meaning on instead of the money, okay? Because the truth of the matter is, when it comes right down to it, this parable, even though there's several $1 million involved, it's not about money. It's about something entirely different that Christ wanted people to learn. Okay. Oh, here we go. Okay, just before I start to take it apart, the setting for this parable. Christ has just left the temple and he's gone to Mount Olive, and as you saw in the video, he is sitting out in the open and he's talking to his disciples and some of the friends of his disciples. One of the things you need to keep in mind is this is often referred to as one of the parables of the last days of Christ. This is just prior to the beginning of that part of his journey through our world where he ends up being crucified. Okay, the Last Supper hasn't taken place yet, but he has been preaching for a good part of the 3.5 years that he was here, or that he was actually preaching. Okay? We also will see as we go through, because we're going to do the 10 virgins and we're not going to do the sheep and goats, but it also is considered one of the last days parables, and we'll find out why. But what's taking place at this time in Jesus' life is he is trying very hard to prepare his disciples for the fact that he, down the road, is going to leave them and be crucified. Okay? But that won't be the end of it. The second piece to that is he will come again. And I want you to start thinking of that just for a second. And if you read Matthew 24 and 25 prior to this parable of the talents, you'll see that Christ is actively engaged in giving very clear warnings about what is coming, about his death, about his crucifixion, about how awful it is going to be, about the people who will betray him. He is warning them well in ahead that this is coming. And he uses parables at this time in his preaching to prepare his disciples for his death and the second coming of Christ. So keep that in mind, all right? So, 1, this is not about money. 2, it is about the death and resurrection and second coming of Christ. And I want you, I'm going to read it to you again, a little, hopefully quicker. But I want you to watch, because I'm going to change some things in it. For it is as if a man going on a journey summoned his people and entrusted his things to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. And that's a really key point. Then he went away. The one who had received the 5 talents went off at once and worked with them, and created 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who had 2 talents made two more talents. But the one who had received the 1 talent went off and did nothing with what he had been given. After a long time, the master of those people came and settled accounts with them. Okay? What happens when Christ comes back? What do we call that? The day of
Resurrection.
judgment. This is the master coming back to judge what his slaves have done with the money he left. After a long time, the master of those slaves came, and the one who had received the 5 talents came forward bringing 5 more talents, saying, Master, you have handed over to me 5 talents. See, I have made 5 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy person. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will therefore put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. And the one with the 2 talents also came forward, saying, Master, you handed over to me 2 talents. See, I have made 2 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. The one who had received 1 talent also came forward, saying, Master, I knew that you were a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent and did nothing with it. So here, have what is yours. But his master replied, You wicked and lazy slave. You knew, did you, that I reap where I do not sow and gather where I do not scatter? Then you ought to have at least done something with what I gave you. And on my return, I would have at least received back what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to the one with 10 talents. For all those who have will be given more. They will have an abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. As for this worthless slave, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So, we can reread that whole thing and take out the whole concept that they were given money. Okay? So, here's the key points. Wealthy man goes on a journey and trusts his servants with something of great value. Talents. Each person is given to his ability 5 to 1 talents. The master returns. Each servant tells the master what he did with what he was given. The third servant buries his money, didn't even put it in the bank or do anything with it. Everyone who uses that which they are given will have more, and those who do not will have even that taken away and be cast out. So, let's back up. Wealthy man goes on a journey. Who do we know eventually goes on a journey? Jesus?
Yeah, go on the journey.
Right. So if we look at this parable as actually talking about something other than what the story is, and we take the position that the master is actually Christ. Okay? And his journey is the time he spends after he is crucified and journeys to heaven to be at the right hand of the Father. Make sense? Okay? But, and as he goes, he entrusts. Christ entrusts us with gifts and skills, talents. We've all been given gifts and skills. Every one of you has a skill. Every one of you has talents. Okay? I think my best one is I can actually wiggle my ears. For sure. Not with these on. So, we've all been entrusted When Christ was crucified for our sins and took on our sin, all right, we were entrusted with the skills that we were given. One of the questions we really need to ask ourselves, just as a bit of an aside there, is we can take two positions with the talents and skills we've been given by God. One, we can be an owner of those talents. That sounds pretty good. Except an owner spends or uses his talents any way they see fit for their own gain. Or we can choose to be stewards of what God has given us. Okay? And if we choose to be stewards, we are using our talents for the betterment of our fellow man and for the glory of God. Okay? So that's a choice we have to make with what God has left us, what Christ has left us now that he is gone. Each is given according to his ability. God does not give us all equal abilities. We can't all play the violin. We can't all do multiplication of 12-digit numbers. We all have our own unique talents. And sometimes we look at somebody else and we say, boy, God gave them a lot more than he gave me. That's not necessarily true, because maybe you just haven't explored the talents that you were given, or you haven't discovered those talents or those skills yet. Okay? And God only gives us talents and skills that he knows we can handle. Okay? He doesn't give us a whole bunch of talents knowing that it's going to drive us crazy and we're going to become a basket case. Okay? He gives us what we can handle. And that's really, really important. And that's why it's important to know each is given according to his ability. So God predetermines our ability, and then he gives us our talents and our skills to match that. Okay? And I keep saying this, you all have talents, don't kid yourself. And I know people get down on themselves and say, you know what, I'm useless, I can't do a dang thing. You can. You got all kinds of talents. Sometimes you just need to sit and figure out what those things are, or have somebody help you figure them out. Okay, so the master returns. This is Jesus coming back from heaven. And we all know that Christ is returning at some point or another, right? So, the one thing about Christ returning, though, is we will, just as the master's servants were called to account for what they did with the money, we know that we're going to be called to account for what we've done with the things that God has given us. And God hasn't given us money and stuff like that. He's given us a body, he's given us life, and he's given us skills and talents. And that's what is going to be called on Judgment Day. What have you done with those? Have you buried them in the dirt, like the servant who only got one? Or did you try to grow those things and make them better, and to even learn some new ones? Obviously, if we do good things with our talents, like the guy with 5 and the guy with 2, what did they get? They got given double. But the guy who did nothing, what did he get? He got nothing. In fact, he had what he had been given taken away. So, it's really important to understand that when you bury your money or you don't make use of your talents, you'll be called on that at some point or another. God has given you those talents for a reason. And one of the primary reasons is to help other people and to be a part of other people's lives in as positive a way as you can. So, and I think we need to remember that our God, by and large, is a very forgiving and caring God who wants us to take chances and learn. This is what Paul said. God said to Paul, "My grace is enough for you, For my power is made perfect in weakness. Not in strength, in weakness. And so Paul's response is, therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest in me. There's nothing wrong with having weaknesses. That's where Christ enters in and comes in and helps us. Not through your strength. He's there to help you with your weaknesses. And so having weaknesses is actually a good Christ-like thing. And finally, everyone who uses that which they are given will have more. Those who do not will have it taken away and be cast out. What is the more that we're going to get? On Judgment Day, or call it what you want, what is the more we're going to get? What is the more waiting for us? Sorry? Blessings? Absolutely. But what else do we get? Where do we get to go? Heaven. We get to go into the kingdom of God. And that's the more. That's what Christ meant when he said that everyone who uses that which they are given will have more. And the more is entrance into the kingdom to spend the rest of their life with God. So, do you see how the story Jesus told really wasn't the story he was telling? Do you see what I mean by a parable? It represented what he was telling for sure, but it was really something else he was telling them about. So our conclusion, our God is a great and generous God who gives us much to watch over and to nourish, not to let it sit idle. We need to use our talents for God's glory and to help others. So I'm going to leave you with 3 questions today. Give you a few minutes to talk about them at your tables. What talents have you been given by God? Do you know? Do you use these talents that you've been given? Do you use them well or at all? And finally, the talents you've been given, are you an owner or are you a steward of those talents? That lady right there is going to explain it to you. Okay,